Welcome on board, chosen one. Step forward and leave behind the ruins of everything they once claimed you would never overcome. Get comfortable, because this journey is about to reveal what happens when people completely misjudge someone. Remember those voices that used to say, "We know exactly how you think. You're easy to figure out. There's nothing extraordinary about you." Well, those same people are now confused, watching closely, because every step you take is breaking the picture they created of you. Look at who suddenly seems nervous. Look at who keeps checking for updates about your life. Look at who cannot stop wondering what you're going to do next. The person they thought was predictable has become the one thing they cannot understand. When they expected you to collapse, you stood back up. When they expected tears, you dried your eyes and continued forward. When they mocked your struggles, life eventually turned the situation around in a way they never expected. They thought you were only a background character in their story. They never imagined you would become the person they couldn't ignore. Now they're going over old conversations, remembering things you said, analyzing your silence, and trying to understand every decision you've made. They are searching for answers because they cannot understand how someone they underestimated became so difficult to predict. You transformed their confidence into uncertainty and their old opinions into questions. If this message speaks to you, take a moment to support it by pressing like and subscribing. Your support helps this message reach more people who need encouragement. Because the truth is, something about your life has changed. You can feel it. There is a different kind of calm around you now. It is the calm that comes after surviving something that was supposed to destroy you. The silence around you isn't weakness. It is the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs to explain themselves. The same people who once approached you with confidence may now be watching from a distance, trying to understand what changed. They are creating theories about you because they never expected you to become this version of yourself. But this transformation did not happen overnight. You've been building it for years. Think back to the moments when people misunderstood you. Maybe they called you strange because they couldn't understand your mindset. Maybe they assumed you were quiet because you lacked confidence. They didn't realize you were developing strength, patience, discipline, and endurance in places nobody could see. You were becoming someone who didn't need constant attention or approval to know their worth. There comes a point in every chosen one's journey when people finally realize they underestimated the wrong person. For you, that realization has been forming through every difficult season you've survived. Through the nights when you had to fight private battles. Through the days when you kept yourself together while others expected you to fall apart. Through every moment when you were ignored, doubted, criticized, or treated like you were not enough. They never understood how closely you observe. You learned to listen before speaking, think before reacting, and recognize patterns before making decisions. Because you never felt the need to announce everything you knew, people confused your silence with ignorance. Now they're trying to understand what they once dismissed. They're wondering, why aren't they responding? Why did they suddenly distance themselves? Why do they seem so different now? What happened to the person we thought we knew? They may ask others about you, search for explanations, and try to connect pieces that no longer fit together. And that's the part they cannot understand. You kept evolving. Every time life tried to break you, you learned something new. Every disappointment gave you another layer of wisdom. Every betrayal taught you discernment. Every difficult season strengthened your ability to stand on your own. You stayed genuine while others played games. You remained loyal when people treated you like an option. You kept your humanity even when life gave you reasons to become bitter. And now your greatest strength is that you no longer react the way people expect. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't constantly explain yourself. You don't return to places that required you to become smaller just to fit in. That is what changed everything. The moment you stopped needing certain people was the moment they lost the ability to control your emotions. The moment you chose yourself, your entire direction began to change. Your power was never about proving everyone wrong. Your power came from continuing forward without needing their approval. Here is the truth they may struggle to accept. They didn't lose you because you were easy to replace. They lost access to you because they never understood your value. They couldn't keep up with the person you were becoming. Every time they thought they had figured you out, you learned, healed, adapted, and became stronger. That's why your growth feels so unexpected to them. They're still comparing you to an older version of yourself, while you're already living from a completely different mindset. You aren't hiding, you aren't trying to impress anyone. You're simply moving differently now, and that difference is impossible to ignore. They can see that you're no longer willing to shrink yourself for their comfort. They can see that your priorities have changed. They can see that you're becoming more focused, more disciplined, and more protective of your peace. And they cannot understand the new version because they were never supposed to have control over it. So, chosen one, pay attention for a moment. If you've made it this far, perhaps you've already sensed that something within you is shifting. Your mindset is changing. Your boundaries are becoming stronger. Your tolerance for unnecessary drama is disappearing. You're beginning to understand that not everyone deserves access to the person you're becoming. This is your moment to step forward instead of looking backward. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Let them misunderstand if they choose. You don't need to interrupt their assumptions. Your life will answer for you. If you're ready to move into this next chapter with confidence, drop 777 in the comments. Let it represent your decision to stop explaining your transformation and start living it. Press like, subscribe, and stand with a community of chosen ones who refuse to let other people's opinions define their future. And now we're going deeper into the truth they never expected you to discover. If something inside you is telling you to keep listening, trust that feeling. Your story isn't finished. You are still becoming. You are still learning. You are still rising. Let's begin. Number 1, the move they never anticipate. It's almost funny how quickly they called you predictable, only for you to completely disrupt every assumption they had about you. They were comfortable because they thought they understood your rhythm. Then you made one quiet change, took a different direction, and suddenly their entire picture of you stopped making sense. They didn't simply lose control of the situation, they realized they never had control over you in the first place. And that realization is something they may never openly admit. What truly unsettles them isn't that you're unpredictable. It's that your decisions are deliberate. You're not moving randomly. You're becoming more thoughtful, more selective, and more aware of where you place your energy. While they're trying to figure out your next step by studying your past, you're already focused on what's ahead. You're not chaotic. You're intentional. Every time they think they've figured out your routine, you change your priorities. You adjust your pace, You protect your time. You take a different route. You let go of an old habit. You become a stronger version of yourself without making an announcement. And suddenly, they're left holding an outdated image of you while you've already moved forward. It's almost poetic. They tried to understand you like a simple formula, but you kept changing because you were never meant to remain the same person forever. They may try to put you into categories. They may call you distant, emotional, quiet, complicated, confident, difficult, or mysterious. But none of those labels can fully describe you. You are allowed to change depending on the season you're in. You are allowed to grow beyond the identity other people created for you. You don't fit neatly into their expectations because those expectations were built around an older version of you. You are the exception that challenges their assumptions. You're the unexpected chapter they never prepared themselves to read. And the more they try to define you, the more obvious it becomes that they never knew the whole story. Here's the truth they struggle with. The harder they try to predict you, the more they realize you're evolving beyond their reach. You're not intentionally confusing anyone. You're simply growing faster than their understanding of you. They're still analyzing who you were while you're already becoming someone new. Imagine how strange that feels for them. They keep returning to an old definition of you, only to discover that it no longer applies. They remember your past reactions, your old habits, your previous fears, and your former limitations. But the person standing in front of them now has learned from all of it. And you may be wondering, why does this bother them so much? Because someone who no longer reacts according to other people's expectations becomes difficult to influence. The moment you learned to pause before responding, you became harder to provoke. The moment you stopped explaining every decision, you became harder to control. The moment you stopped participating in situations that drained you, their influence over you began to disappear. Your peace became more important than their approval. Now they may analyze your silence, your distance, your timing, or your sudden changes. They may wonder why you didn't respond immediately or why you chose a different path. But they are searching for answers in places where there may be none. Sometimes silence simply means you're protecting your peace. Sometimes distance simply means you're choosing better priorities. You aren't moving without direction, you're moving with awareness. Your quiet moments are not wasted. They may be the exact moments when you're thinking, planning, healing, learning, and preparing for your next chapter. While other people are looking for visible evidence of change, you're building things internally that don't need an audience. That's one of the greatest strengths you have learned, the ability to transform without announcing every step. You don't need to explain every change. You don't need to tell everyone where you're going. You don't need to reveal every plan before it becomes reality. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is move quietly and let your results speak later. That's why people who expected you to remain the same may feel surprised by your growth. They aren't seeing chaos. They're seeing evolution. And evolution naturally creates distance between you and people who refuse to grow. Sometimes you change because you've outgrown an environment. Sometimes you change because you've learned a difficult lesson. Sometimes you change because your priorities have matured. And sometimes you simply realize that being predictable for people who never appreciated you isn't worth the effort. Here's the real reason they can't completely figure you out. Your life isn't a puzzle they are entitled to solve. You don't owe everyone access to your thoughts, your plans, your emotions, or your next move. You are allowed to keep parts of your journey private. You are allowed to make decisions without seeking permission. You are allowed to change your mind when new wisdom comes into your life. What they may see as unpredictability can simply be your freedom. Your ability to adapt protects you from becoming trapped by other people's expectations. It helps you recognize when something no longer fits and gives you the courage to move forward, instead of remaining stuck. And yes, some people may feel confused by that. They may be surprised. They may even become curious about what you're doing next. But their confusion doesn't need to become your concern. The most important thing is that you understand yourself. You know why certain situations make you step back. You know when you need quiet. You know when it's time to change direction. You know which environments help you grow and which ones constantly pull you backward. That self-awareness is more powerful than trying to make everyone else understand you. It's also why you've survived seasons that once looked impossible. You learned to recognize patterns. You learned when to speak and when to remain silent. You learned when to stay and when to walk away. You learned that not every battle deserves your energy. You didn't come this far so that everyone could have a complete map of your life. You came this far to become wiser, stronger, more grounded, and more intentional. So let them keep comparing you to who you used to be. Let them wonder why you changed. Let them question why you no longer react the same way. Your responsibility isn't to maintain an old version of yourself just because it makes other people comfortable. You are allowed to evolve. You are the chapter they didn't expect. You're the version of yourself they never prepared for. And the most powerful part is that you don't need to prove anything through drama or confrontation. Your growth is enough. You are the move they never saw coming. Number 2, they don't want to understand you. They want to discover your blueprint. They don't simply want to figure you out. They want to understand what created the person you've become. They see qualities in you that they wish they had. And instead of appreciating the journey behind them, they start searching for shortcuts. Jealousy isn't always obvious. Sometimes it watches quietly, pays attention, remembers details, and tries to reproduce what it sees. Here's something nobody tells you, chosen one. Some people who claim they're confused by you aren't actually confused. They're fascinated by your transformation. They want to know how you developed that confidence, that calmness, that ability to stand alone. But understanding your journey would require them to acknowledge the work behind it. And that's uncomfortable. They don't necessarily want your story. They want the results of your story. Imagine someone watching you enter a room with a confidence you barely notice anymore. They observe how people respond when you speak. They notice how you maintain your boundaries without becoming defensive. They pay attention to your timing, your words, and even the way you remain composed when pressure rises. Somewhere in their mind they think, if I can figure out how they became this way, maybe I can become this way too. What they don't understand is that your presence wasn't created overnight. It was built through experiences they never witnessed. It came from difficult seasons, lonely decisions, disappointments, lessons, and moments when you had to keep moving without applause. That's why certain people don't really check on you. They check your progress. They want to know how you're feeling, what you're planning, whether you've changed, and whether the growth they noticed is real. Conversations about your past may sound like curiosity, but sometimes people are simply trying to understand what shaped you. They're looking for the formula. They want the habits, the mindset, the confidence, the discipline, and the lessons without having to experience the process that produced them. It's like watching someone finish a difficult race and then asking for the exact routine that made them strong without wanting to run the miles. They may imitate your calmness, but imitation doesn't automatically create peace. They may copy your confidence, but confidence built on appearance disappears under pressure. They may try to appear independent, but real independence comes from learning how to stand when nobody is clapping. They want the glow without the growth. They want the strength without the difficult seasons that developed it. They want clarity without confronting the uncomfortable truths that gave you that clarity. They want the final result without experiencing the transformation. And that's what separates you from them. You didn't simply wake up one day and become this version of yourself. You were shaped by every season you survived. You learned from mistakes. You adapted after disappointment. You rebuilt after setbacks. You became more aware because life forced you to become more aware. They want the crown, but they don't want the responsibility that comes with it. They want recognition, but they don't want the lonely nights when you had to figure things out without anyone encouraging you. They want the confidence, but they don't want the uncertainty that you had to overcome before developing it. And you may wonder, why would someone want to imitate you after previously treating you like you weren't important? Because people often overlook what they have not yet learned to value. When you were struggling, they may not have paid attention. When you were still developing, they may have underestimated you. But once your growth became visible, their perspective changed. Suddenly, the person they dismissed became someone they couldn't stop comparing themselves to. Your progress became evidence of what was possible. Imagine two people starting from different places. One spends years quietly learning, practicing, failing, adjusting, and improving. The other spends those same years laughing at the person doing the work. Eventually, the results become visible. Now the person who once mocked the process wants to know the method. That's the irony. Your transformation doesn't need revenge. Your growth speaks loudly enough on its own. And here's the truth that imitation can never overcome. You cannot copy what experience taught someone. You can imitate someone's habits, but you cannot duplicate the lessons behind them. You can repeat their words, but you cannot manufacture the wisdom that gave those words meaning. You can copy their appearance of confidence, but you cannot recreate the inner foundation that keeps them steady. You can't fake resilience for long. You can't manufacture authenticity by watching someone else. You can't reproduce genuine growth without doing your own inner work. If someone wants your peace, they have to learn how to create peace within themselves. If they admire your discernment, they have to develop their own wisdom. If they want your confidence, they have to confront the insecurities that keep them from having it. Your identity isn't a template. Your journey isn't a trend. Your strength isn't an act. Everything you carry was earned through experiences that belong specifically to you. Someone can study your habits for years and still never gain access to the internal transformation that made those habits possible. They may want shortcuts, they may want techniques, they may want an easy formula that gives them the same outcome. But some things cannot be downloaded because they are developed through living. They want your intelligence without the years of being misunderstood. They want your intuition without the difficult lessons that sharpened it. They want your independence without experiencing the moments that taught you how to stand alone. They want your peace without facing the inner battles that once disturbed it. And that's why they cannot become you. They haven't lived your story. They haven't carried your responsibilities. They haven't learned your lessons. They haven't walked through the exact seasons that shaped your character. They can admire the masterpiece, but they cannot duplicate the hands that created it. People sometimes try to become like someone else when they realize they cannot replace them. That's where comparison can turn into obsession. Instead of developing their own identity, they start constantly measuring themselves against another person. But here's the part they may eventually discover. Authenticity is more powerful than imitation. A copy can look similar, but it will never carry the same meaning as the original. Someone can follow your path, repeat your methods, or borrow your style, but their journey will always be different. You are not a formula. You are a person who has evolved through experience, so let them watch. Let them learn whatever lessons they can from your example. But don't become distracted by whether someone is copying you. Keep improving, keep growing. Keep becoming more of who you were created to be. They can follow your footsteps, but they still have to walk their own road. They may want your blueprint, chosen one, but the real power was never in the blueprint. It was in the journey that created you. Number 3, the obsession that takes over their thoughts. They may not simply miss your presence. They may struggle with the fact that you've moved forward without needing them. And that distinction matters. When someone expects you to keep looking back but discovers that you've genuinely continued your life, their expectations can be challenged. They may remember old conversations, wonder what you're doing now, or occasionally check for signs of your life. But your responsibility isn't to decode their behavior. Your responsibility is to keep your attention on your own growth. The most powerful shift happens when you stop living for someone else's reaction. You aren't chasing, you aren't trying to create jealousy, you aren't sending hidden messages. You're simply continuing forward. You have learned that peace doesn't require an audience, and progress doesn't require everyone to understand it. You moved forward, and they may still be trying to understand why. Number 4. The reflection that challenges their ego. Some people don't struggle with a mirror because of what it shows them. They struggle because eventually the mirror reveals what they've been avoiding. Number 4. The reflection that exposes what they avoid. You didn't have to expose anyone. Your growth revealed the truth all by itself. Sometimes the most uncomfortable realization is seeing someone you once underestimated become the person you wish you had the courage to become. Chosen one. They may have started out watching you as if you were a puzzle they could easily solve, but somewhere along the way the situation changed. You stopped being the person they were analyzing and became a reflection of everything they had been avoiding within themselves. Every time they notice your confidence, they may become more aware of their own uncertainty. Every time they see you establish healthy boundaries, they may recognize the places where they have allowed others to cross their limits. Every time they witness your calmness, they may become more conscious of the disorder they have created in their own lives. Imagine someone looking at you, expecting to discover weaknesses, only to realize that the deeper they look, the more they are confronted by their own insecurities. That can be uncomfortable. But remember, your purpose isn't to make anyone feel inferior. You don't need to compete with anyone. Your responsibility is simply to continue becoming healthier, wiser, and stronger. You don't have to make yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Your growth may remind people of the possibilities they haven't pursued, but that isn't something you need to apologize for. They may not even envy your achievements as much as they envy the freedom you developed along the way. Sometimes what people truly want isn't your life. They want the version of themselves they never allowed themselves to become. Number 5. The code they'll never completely uncover. Everyone notices the results, but very few people understand the cost behind them. People may admire your confidence, your discipline, your peace, or your strength, but they don't always see what happened before those qualities became part of you. They want the outcome without understanding the process. Chosen one. Let's make this simple. There isn't some secret instruction manual hidden inside you that someone else can download. Your mindset wasn't created by a shortcut. It was shaped by experience, pressure, mistakes, recovery, and the decision to keep moving when quitting would have been easier. Think about a diamond. Someone can admire its brilliance, but they cannot understand its formation by simply staring at the finished stone. They have to understand the pressure that came before it. In the same way, people may see your confidence today without knowing the difficult seasons that helped build it. They didn't see the nights when you questioned yourself. They didn't see the moments when you had to rebuild your confidence. They didn't see the times you kept going without encouragement. They didn't see every lesson that forced you to become more self-aware. So they may assume your strength is a technique they can copy, but real strength doesn't work that way. There is no shortcut to becoming an authentic version of yourself. No trick can replace personal growth. No strategy can substitute for experience. You become stronger by confronting what needs to change, releasing what no longer belongs in your life, and having the courage to rebuild. You didn't simply study resilience, you developed it by living through situations that required it, and that's why nobody can completely duplicate your journey. Number 6. The moment the roles completely changed. There was a time when certain people may have looked at you from a distance and judged your choices. They felt comfortable observing you because they assumed they understood your place. But when you stopped seeking their attention and started focusing on your own progress, the dynamic changed. You didn't need to reverse the roles. Your growth naturally changed the situation. The people who once wondered whether you would notice them may eventually become more conscious of how they present themselves. They may think about what they post, what they say, or how they appear because your opinion suddenly matters more than it once did. But here's the important part. You don't have to participate in that performance you didn't chase. You didn't beg. You didn't try to prove anything. You simply redirected your attention toward your own life. And when you stop needing to be seen by people who once overlooked you, you become free from the pressure of performing for them. They may compare their progress to yours. They may notice your confidence or your peace. They may wonder what changed, but the strongest position is not caring whether they're watching. The spotlight doesn't matter when you've learned how to walk confidently without one. Number 7, the patterns they can't figure out. Some people don't spend their energy trying to understand who you are. They spend it trying to understand why they can no longer influence how you respond. Your silence may confuse someone who expected an argument. Your distance may surprise someone who expected you to chase. Your decision to walk away may frustrate someone who thought you would keep explaining yourself. They may analyze your response time, your tone, your boundaries, or your sudden changes in direction. But they're missing the bigger picture. You're not necessarily inconsistent, you're adaptable. You have learned that different situations require different responses. Sometimes you speak, sometimes you listen. Sometimes you step back. Sometimes you completely change direction because something no longer feels right. That's not weakness, that's awareness. You don't have to behave exactly the same way in every situation simply to make yourself easier for other people to understand. You're allowed to respond according to what you've learned. Imagine someone trying to understand a combination lock that changes whenever they think they've figured it out. That's what happens when someone keeps expecting an old version of you to appear, only to discover that you've learned from every previous experience. They want a fixed pattern because fixed patterns are easier to predict. But personal growth means you won't always respond the way you did yesterday. You're not a category, you're a person who continues to learn. And the more you grow, the less useful old assumptions become. Number 8. The fear that comes from losing control. Sometimes people aren't afraid of losing access to you as much as they're afraid of realizing they never had the control they believed they had. Control disappears when someone stops reacting automatically. One of the strongest choices you can make is choosing thoughtful silence instead of responding to every provocation. You don't have to answer every accusation. You don't have to defend yourself against every opinion. You don't have to participate in every emotional game. When you stop giving unnecessary reactions, other people lose the ability to predict how you'll respond. That's where your freedom begins. They may depend on predictable reactions to feel powerful or relevant. But when you change the cycle, their old strategies stop working. They are left using yesterday's assumptions against today's version of you. It's like trying to hold on to smoke. The harder you try to control it, the faster it moves beyond your grasp. But remember, you don't need to become cold or suspicious of everyone. Your strength is not about assuming bad intentions everywhere. It's about developing enough awareness to recognize when a situation isn't healthy for you and having the courage to step away. You've learned from difficult experiences. You've learned to notice patterns, protect your energy, and take your time before trusting people deeply. You don't need revenge. You don't need confrontation. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply choosing not to participate. You can recognize someone's behavior without becoming consumed by it. You can understand a situation without allowing it to control you. You can see what is happening and still choose peace. And perhaps that's the part people understand least about you now. You know more than you say, you notice more than you reveal, and you no longer feel obligated to engage with everything you recognize. Number 9. The meltdown. They can't hide their confusion anymore. When people can't bring you down, they sometimes create stories to explain why you kept rising. They label you, analyze you, and search for reasons they can't control you. But the truth is simple. You rebuilt yourself before they ever realized you were broken. They keep looking for the old version of you, the one they underestimated, dismissed, or thought they could manipulate. But that version is gone. You survived the seasons they thought would destroy you, and now their theories can't reach the person you've become. Number 10. The case they'll never close. They've turned your life into a puzzle, studying your silence, your decisions, your boundaries, and every unexpected move. But they're searching for a complicated explanation when the answer is much simpler. You're not playing games, you're simply being authentic. Your peace isn't manipulation. Your silence isn't a secret strategy, your boundaries aren't an attack. You're just no longer pretending to be someone you're not. That's why they struggle to understand you. Your honesty exposes what they hide. Your boundaries challenge what they tolerate, and your calm makes their chaos impossible to ignore. You're not an unsolved mystery. They're simply trying to understand someone who stopped performing for approval. Number 11. The moment everything unravels. They didn't just lose access to you. They lost the version of themselves they performed when you were around. Your presence forced them to see qualities they needed to develop, and your absence removed the distraction. They may want your confidence, your discipline, your emotional strength, or your resilience, but those qualities can't simply be downloaded. They were built through your experiences. You didn't make them feel exposed. Your authenticity simply gave them nothing to hide behind. Number 12. The energy shift they never expected. When you stepped away, you didn't create the emptiness. They simply noticed what was already missing. Your presence may have brought warmth, encouragement, stability, or motivation, but they confused that influence with something they could always access. Once you pulled your energy back, they had to face their own reality. And that's when they realized your value wasn't in what you gave them, it was in who you were. You were never responsible for making their world feel complete. Number 13. The respect they never expected to give. These were the same people who once questioned your boundaries, mocked your standards, or misunderstood your silence. They assumed you would remain the same person forever, but you changed. You didn't demand respect through arguments. You earned it through consistency, growth, and the courage to stop shrinking yourself. The moment you stopped seeking their approval, their opinion lost its power over you. And sometimes the strongest form of respect is simply realizing that someone no longer needs to be convinced of their own worth. Number 14. The ending that destroyed their script. They expected your downfall, but witnessed your comeback. They mistook your silence for defeat. They misunderstood your distance. They thought every difficult season was proof that you were falling apart, but you were rebuilding. The version of you that walked through the fire wasn't the same person who entered it. You became wiser, clearer, stronger, and more protective of your peace. Now they're left trying to understand an ending they never predicted. They expected you to remain stuck in their story. Instead, you became the author of your own. And here's the final truth. You were never the mystery they needed to solve. They were simply trying to understand why their old definition of you stopped working. You didn't become someone they couldn't understand. You became someone they could no longer control. But chosen one, before you leave this message, understand something very important. The story was never really about them. It was about you. It was about the person you became after everything that tried to break you. It was about the nights nobody saw, the battles you fought quietly, the moments you had every reason to quit, but somehow found another reason to continue. They may have watched the outcome, but they didn't witness the process. They saw your confidence, but they didn't see the insecurity you had to overcome. They saw your peace, but they didn't see the chaos you had to survive. They saw your strength, but they didn't see the moments when you felt completely exhausted. They saw the new version of you. They never understood what it took to create that version. And that's why they keep trying to figure you out. Because from the outside, transformation looks sudden, but transformation is never sudden. It happens quietly, one decision at a time, one boundary at a time, one painful lesson at a time, one moment of choosing yourself instead of returning to what hurt you. That's how you became different, not because you wanted to impress anyone, not because you wanted revenge, but because you finally realized that remaining the same person just to keep other people comfortable was costing you too much. And that realization changed everything. Think about how many times you were expected to react. You were expected to argue. You were expected to explain. You were expected to chase. You were expected to prove yourself. But eventually, you stopped. And that silence became powerful. Not because silence is always the answer, but because you finally understood that not every situation deserves your energy. Not every accusation deserves a response. Not every opinion deserves an explanation. Not every person deserves access to your heart. That is maturity. That is growth. That is the difference between who you were and who you're becoming. And maybe that's what people around you are noticing now. You're not as available as you used to be. You're not as easily triggered. You're not constantly looking for approval. You're not trying to convince everyone that you're a good person. You're simply living. And when you stop performing for people, they are forced to experience you as you actually are. That's uncomfortable for anyone who benefited from the old version of you. But don't let their discomfort make you question your progress. You are not responsible for maintaining an identity that other people created for you. You are allowed to change. You're allowed to outgrow friendships. You're allowed to change your priorities. You're allowed to become quieter. You're allowed to become more selective. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to walk away from situations that no longer align with who you're becoming. And most importantly, you're allowed to become someone your past self would barely recognize. Because that's what growth does. It changes you. It teaches you. It stretches you. It removes things you once thought you couldn't live without. And sometimes it introduces you to a version of yourself you never knew existed. So if people are confused by your transformation, let them be confused. If they don't understand your new boundaries, they don't have to. If they wonder why you stopped explaining yourself, you don't owe them an answer. Your life is not a public investigation. Your future does not require everyone's approval. And your purpose does not need everyone to understand it. Some chapters are meant to be lived quietly. Some victories are meant to happen without an announcement. Some breakthroughs happen while nobody is watching, and that's okay. Because the strongest version of you may be built in silence. There will come a day when you'll look back and realize that the season you thought was destroying you was actually preparing you. The rejection taught you discernment. The disappointment taught you patience. The betrayal taught you boundaries. The loneliness taught you independence. The uncertainty taught you faith. The struggle taught you resilience. And the waiting taught you that not everything happens according to your timeline. You thought you were losing pieces of yourself, but perhaps you were losing everything that was never truly meant to define you. And now you're standing here with a different mindset, a clearer vision, a stronger heart, a quieter confidence, and a deeper understanding of who you are. That's why you don't need to chase the people who walked away. You don't need to convince the people who misunderstood you. You don't need to compete with the people who doubted you. And you definitely don't need to become bitter because someone failed to recognize your value. Let them have their opinion. You have your purpose. Let them remember the old version. You are busy becoming the new one. And here's something I want you to remember when this video ends. Your greatest comeback may not be making everyone regret losing you. Your greatest comeback may be reaching a point where you no longer care whether they regret it. Read that again. The real victory isn't their reaction. The real victory is your peace. It's waking up without needing to know who's watching. It's moving forward without checking who noticed. It's succeeding without needing to prove someone wrong. It's becoming so focused on your future that the opinions of your past lose their power. That's freedom. And chosen one, you're closer to that freedom than you realize. Maybe you've been waiting for a sign. Maybe you've been wondering whether you're actually making progress. Maybe you've been questioning whether all the sacrifices are worth it. Let this be your reminder. Keep going. You don't need to see the entire staircase. You only need enough courage to take the next step. The door that closed behind you may have been necessary. The person who left may have created space. The delay may have protected you. The rejection may have redirected you. The ending may have been the beginning you couldn't recognize yet. So don't rush back to something simply because the unknown feels uncomfortable. Sometimes the unknown is where your next level is waiting. And when you finally reach it, you'll understand why certain things had to fall apart. You'll understand why certain people couldn't come with you. You'll understand why certain doors refused to open. You'll understand why God allowed you to walk through seasons that felt impossible. Because not every closed door was punishment. Some were protection, some were redirection, some were preparation, and some were simply the end of a chapter that had already taught you everything it was supposed to teach you. So breathe, slow down, trust the process. You don't have to have everything figured out tonight. You don't have to know exactly how everything will work out. You just have to keep moving with faith. Keep your heart clean, keep your standards strong, keep your boundaries healthy, keep learning, keep growing, and don't allow someone else's inability to recognize you to become the reason you stop recognizing yourself. You are still becoming. Your story is still unfolding. There are chapters you haven't reached yet. There are opportunities you haven't seen yet. There are people you haven't met yet. There are prayers you haven't watched unfold yet. There are versions of yourself you haven't discovered yet. So don't let one painful chapter convince you that the entire book is over. It isn't. You're still writing, and perhaps the most powerful chapter hasn't even started. Maybe this season isn't about proving them wrong. Maybe it's about finally becoming everything you were too afraid to become before. Maybe the next chapter isn't about revenge. Maybe it's about restoration. Maybe it's about peace. Maybe it's about purpose. Maybe it's about finally living without carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. So when you leave this video, don't go searching for who is watching you. Go build. Don't wonder who regrets losing you. Go, grow. Don't obsess over who misunderstood you. Go, become. Don't spend another hour trying to decode someone else's behavior. Use that energy to understand yourself, because your future deserves more attention than your past, and your purpose deserves more energy than your enemies. Chosen one, if you are still listening right now, I want you to remember one final thing. You survived every version of yourself that thought it wouldn't make it, and you're still here. That means something. You are stronger than the season that tried to define you. You are wiser than the mistakes that once embarrassed you. You are more capable than the people who underestimated you ever imagined, and you are not finished, not even close. So walk forward quietly if you need to, slowly if you need to, but keep walking. Let your actions speak. Let your character speak. Let your growth speak. Let God handle the rest. And if this message found you at exactly the right time, comment 777 below. Not because a number magically changes your life, but because it can be your personal reminder. I am not going backward. I am not shrinking again. I am not living for approval anymore. I am becoming who I was created to be. And remember this, when you close this video, they may have known your past. They may have misunderstood your present, but they have no idea what your future holds. So stop explaining, stop chasing, stop proving, start becoming. Because one day, the same people who thought they had your story figured out may realize something. Very simple. They never knew the ending, and neither did you. That's because the best chapter is still being written. Keep going, chosen one. Your story isn't over, it's just getting started.